So,
Okay.
I'm Dreenagh, and I'm the parent and primary carer to my daughter, Odyssey Lyle. Now, dear, so in order to... You're not a pig. Do you see that? You're not a pig. How interesting that she mentioned pigs. Today, when we're about to talk about my friends. That is really quite interesting, isn't it? About the beginning of March, I got a letter from the DWP telling me that my daughter had to complete a capability for work assessment. It asked so many questions along the lines of could she lift her arm to dress? I rang them up, asked them, thought they'd made a mistake. They said no, everybody who receives severe disablement allowance has to complete this form. They've always been saying that people like my daughter, the most impaired, will not be affected. They'll most likely get more benefits. It's all been in the news for a long time, since the days of the coalition government, that the people who receive incapacity allowance are being encouraged to work. The argument being that a lot of them stopped work years ago through their incapacity. People become depressed, break legs, having health issues, whatever. I have a friend who worked for an employment company, and that was their contract with the government, to get people with incapacity who were on incapacity benefit, to get them into work. And he believed the government line that the majority of these people on incapacity benefit were what you would call skivers, chancing it. And he found that actually there was a tiny percentage like that. Mostly they were people who, with support, could get a job. I know people with milder learning disabilities than my daughter who want to work. No one will employ them. So rather than demonising people with disabilities for not having a job, shouldn't we be asking why employers won't employ people? That's another discussion. He didn't see anybody with learning disability, because people with severe learning disability and, like my daughter, multiple disabilities, are on the other side of the benefit. The clue is in the word: severe disablement. So severely disabled people get an allowance that's additional to your basic income support. They don't get job seekers allowance because they are not seeking work. Odyssey doesn't go looking for work because she doesn't have the capacity to understand the concept of work. She doesn't have the capacity to understand why the way she sits is giving her health issues. I've had to send off a 20-page booklet where I tried to fill it in online so I could do it quicker. Online, it didn't have the space. You couldn't do more than a couple of lines. So my daughter has 9 diagnoses. So I needed to write about every one of her diagnoses. How does her total blindness, her visual impairment, how does that impact on her life? All avenues of her life. How does her profound learning disability impact on her life? How does her autism impact on her life? How does her skin disorder impact on her life? How does her epilepsy impact on her life? How does her sensory integration disorder impact on her life? How does her cerebral palsy impact on her life? And there's one more, or her hyperacusis. How does that impact? So how do I describe all of those in a little tiny box like that? And then it said, give us any reports. When you're an adult, put it this way, nowadays, if you are a child with severe disabilities, you will have a specialist paediatric team all through your childhood years. Once you come into adult services, boom, nothing. You don't have Odyssey needs specialist support. She doesn't get it. We haven't even had a review for 4 years because of difficulties with our local adult services. They can't retain social workers. So Odyssey's ability to communicate is at a behavioural level. All she can do is screech if she doesn't like something, lash out if she's concerned, but she can't tell us in words anything. She has the mental capacity, it's been measured at about 18 to 20 months. I think it's an absolute beyond insult to people who cannot function beyond the level of a 2-year-old child to actually then say, oh, well, we'll just pretend. We'll just act as if. We know your daughter's never going to work. You know your daughter's never going to work. And we all know this, so we just won't tell him. We'll put them in a little separate group. Well, actually, let's stop all of that. Because as a parent of somebody with profound disabilities, you can't play as if games. You have to have a very clear understanding of this individual, otherwise you can't provide the right support for them. I've just written a PhD on this subject, and I would argue that it's actually an oppressive practice to over-ascribe capacity to someone, which is what this is doing by dint. This is refusing to acknowledge that there are people in our society who are this disabled. Now, if I go back to Treadgold, this was the original eugenicist who said, people like my daughter we have the burden of their unproductiveness to cope with and deal with. And this is what this Ian Duncan Smith, or this department now, whoever's running it, I don't even know, the crab guy, what they're saying is, we found the group who are, let's say, a bit disabled, people on incapacity, and we're going to force them into work, even if, it means, how many have died so far? Over 2,000 people have died so far as a direct result of being found fit to work. And within the next few weeks, they were dead. Some have committed suicide. Some have starved to death because their benefits were cut off. And the trouble is, when you get the form, you get a very aggressive letter. It said, if you don't get this form in, your benefits will be cut and you won't get them back. So I think they're clearly hoping a lot of people don't fill out the form, can't fill out the form. I'm just wondering who's responsible for filling out when people don't have family. So what I'm convinced is that form is about getting people who can't fill it in, never mind all the people with, English as a second language difficulties, so that people will think, do you know what? It's only 80 quid a week, bugger you, I'll pay it. That's what I think they're hoping for, and that's what I think a lot of people would do, me included, if I had another £80 a week.